Well, usual format, names, pronouns, icebreaker, which for today I'll ask, what term do you like to use when talking about a penis? And I will go first. My name is Jonathan, pronouns are he, him, and I only really like the term dick. I think anything else is like, ugh, especially the word cock. Ugh. So, what about you guys?
I can go. My name is Michael. I also use he, him pronouns. I think I would say the same. I would normally say just like dick or penis, and not really anything else. Though the story did give some interesting new ones to throw into the rotation. So maybe I'll think about adding influence or something to that list.
I can go next. Yes, Saul is my name. I also use he, him pronouns. I would also say that I almost exclusively use dick. Even saying like penis, I feel like it's more like when you go to the doctor is when I would use that. But yeah, and yeah, the book definitely was very creative in all of the ways that it talked about different things.
Okay, so my name's Arian. I use any pronouns and I'm fine with dick and cock. Penis is definitely more medical, and I like using appendage when it's kind of like ironic, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, well, I have kind of a plan for this book. I know it goes back and forth between timelines quite often, so I was thinking just in the nature of time and in the nature of not forgetting anything, we can kind of discuss the stories in chronological order. So we would start, of course, with the Emperor and the Courtier, and then end with River and Joey. Uh, does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
Okay, good. So first, I will ask, what did everyone think of the book, The Emperor and the Endless Palace by Justinian Huang?
This was actually one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I had a lot of fun reading it. It was definitely a different, um, like so much of it was different than other books that I read. As it was getting towards the end, there were some things that surprised me that I didn't quite like, but I still really enjoyed reading it.
Yeah, I also enjoyed this one quite a lot. Reading for like some escapism is like a pretty big motivator for me sometimes, and I
Your
definitely got
mic
that.
is cutting out a little bit. Michael, could you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Um, no, just saying I also enjoyed it, and that like reading for some sense of like escapism sometimes is a big motivator for me, and I definitely got that with this one. So I appreciated that a lot. A nice fun read.
I really, really wanted to enjoy this book, but I ended up being so disappointed by the end and by the book in general. I think this might be on par with the House of Impossible Beauties, or maybe even lower for it than me, which is crazy. I think I just had high expectations, and then it just didn't meet any or most of them. It was, yeah. I'm just disappointed. I guess, which is crazy.
Yeah, I agree with Arian. I went into it wanting to like it. I think I felt a little bit I guess cheated because the book is categorized as a romantasy, and I didn't really get romance at all. I got a lot of sex, which is okay, it's fun to read, but where's the romance? Where's the love? Especially considering this is meant to be a story that their love is so strong it transcends time. I don't really get what about their attraction to each other was so strong. Um, I think I liked the light fantasy elements, although I have to say all of the rules and the way the world works in this story didn't fully make sense to me. I think the author could have explained those things a little bit more. Um, and yeah, like Arian, I think overall disappointed with how the story ends. I was kind of hoping for a happy ending, like I said at the end of last meeting, but no, we don't really get that, or at least in my opinion, we don't. So yeah. And I kind of want to try something new. I want us to all kind of go around and like rate the book out of 5. I'll give it like a 2.8, close to a 3. What about you guys?
Like I said, I really liked it. So for me, it was like a 4.5.
I'll say like 3.75.
Um, 2.5, maybe 2.75.
I like that we have so many we have people on both ends of the spectrum. I think that'll have a really good conversation. So good. Okay. First, I'll ask, what did you guys think of the author's decision to kind of have the story be told in like 3 timelines that switch back and forth so often? Did that hinder the story to you guys, or did it benefit the story to you?
I appreciated it. I will say I think that for me, at least, I didn't, in my mind when I was going through it, I didn't envision that much of a difference between the first 2 timelines in terms of like environment, the same way that I did with the third one. Um, but otherwise, I appreciate it. I always like these little new storytelling techniques are just sort of like fun. I don't want to say gimmicks, but um, different ways to explore the stories. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I liked it. I had read some reviews of it, how people did not like the fact that like each chapter was so short, and that's actually one of things that I liked. I like when chapters kind of close up really fast, and that's like a natural way for me to like stop reading at that point. Um, yeah, so I like the telling of the different um, times. The river storyline was probably my least favorite of them all. But I think as it went further ahead, I liked it more. But still, I like the different telling of the story in that way.
Um, I it kind of left me feeling like the story was a bit choppy sometimes because I would get into, or I would kind of feel one part of the timeline and then it would suddenly shift into a different part of the timeline. And some parts of the book, I'm not sure if I'm like recounting it correctly, but like some parts of the book would be, or like one timeline would be kind of chill and not that um full of impending doom and stuff. And the next timeline would be like full on crisis. It would be blood gushing from the neck. I think that was around the part where the timelines were kind of disconnected. I'm not sure. But yeah, I thought I would have enjoyed the 3 timelines more. Um, I think my favorite one was the the fox one. It was the most. Uh, it was the first POV, if I'm remembering it correctly, and I think it was the one that just stuck for me.
I did want to add that moving on the timelines did add intrigue to me because then I kept wanting to read more to see how everything was connected and like who was who, like in each timeline. So I like that too as like a use of that format to build that kind of mystery within it.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit torn. I think that with the storylines jumping back and forth so often, it wasn't. Sorry, I muted myself on accident. I was saying that I think I'm a bit torn on the moving storylines as the switching back and forth of storylines. I think doing it so often, it was kind of nice because when I read my least favorite POV, I knew that I only have to read up to this one chapter and I can be done with them for a while. So that was nice. But also, I think that switching back and forth so much kind of doesn't allow, at least me as a reader, to really get to know or even care about my characters in each story because I'm spending so little time with each of them. Especially, I think the job of a romance novel is to kind of make you root for the love connection of your main characters in your story. And I wasn't really rooting for anybody because I just didn't really know who anybody was. And each storyline has like 4 or 5 characters. And if I'm being honest, I kept forgetting who was who. It wasn't until around like the middle of the book I finally began to realize which character belongs to which storyline. Um, so yeah, I don't know if I would say it hindered my enjoyment, but it definitely didn't help it. Also, I think I would have preferred had the author gone in chronological order. Like we start off with the 4 BCE timeline, we wrap that up, and then we go into the 1740 and then the present day. I think that would have kind of allowed me to sit with my characters and get to know them a bit more, but that's just, I guess, my own personal enjoyment of the book. And I know that both Arian and Saul, you shared your least favorite storylines. I'm kind of curious, uh, what are your favorites? And then Michael, of course, I want you to answer as well. What were your least favorite and your favorite POVs in the book?
At the beginning, I really enjoyed the Emperor one, but as the Innkeeper one went along more, I enjoyed that the most just because of the fantasy aspect of it and like the magic. I thought that was really cool. Yeah, and the River one just felt like it was dragging or just like I don't know. I didn't quite like the River one. Eventually, I liked it more, but um, yeah, it was okay.
Actually, the same choice as Saul. The innkeeper one, most favorite, and then the river one, least favorite. I don't know. I didn't connect with River. Um, River kind of fell flat as a character in general for me as a whole. Um, but we could talk about that later. Yeah.
I'll say my least favorite was the River and Joey timeline. And I think that is just because I didn't find it as believable because it was set in present day. And there were some things I was kind of like, I don't know, like if I would buy this, or I think maybe trying too much to envision this in real life. And I think my least favorite, or sorry, my favorite, um, I actually kind of like the one with the Emperor, and I only like it more than the Innkeeper because I think I wanted more from the Fox's point of view in that one and less from the Innkeeper. But yeah, those are mine.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. I think my favorite, I was a bit torn between the Innkeeper and the Emperor. And at the beginning, my favorite was the Innkeeper, but I think as it went along, that story for me got a little messy and I didn't really get where it was going to go. And then the ending of that story, I was just like, what? So I think to wrap the story up, my favorite ended up being the Emperor's storyline. I really wish we would have got more out of that, especially because when we finish the book, we're told what happens between those two characters. And I would have actually really liked to read sort of the unraveling of their relationship as opposed to just all the sex they were having. Um, and my least favorite, to agree with all of you guys, I hated Rivers' storyline. I thought he was such an annoying character. But he also, I think I talked about this with Michael a little bit. He's like the very typical erotic novel character, the kind of like stupid, naive, making stupid decisions in the name of love kind of character, which I found so puzzling because it's set up for us that River is actually really, really smart. I mean, he's studying to be a doctor in medical school at I think like 20 or so years old. Yet he makes the stupidest decisions out of all the characters and all the storylines, in my opinion. And yeah, and then also the dialogue in the River and Joey storyline, I was like, is this the way the author thinks that young adults talk? Because the dialogue felt so ugh, like a 40-year-old writing dialogues for 16-year-olds is how that felt to me. Also, the River storyline for me felt the most YA, even though in all the storylines, they're all the same age. They're all, I think, like 20 or 21. Yet the River and Joey storyline felt the most juvenile to me. And I think that is at least in part because I'm sure throughout each century, what it means to be a young adult is obviously different. But again, the River storyline to me just felt so YA. And I'm not someone who likes YA, so yeah, that's just me. Um, and I guess we might as well talk about the sex. What did we all think about the sex in the book?
I thought some of it was very unbelievable, but and I also don't know that it always served the purpose that I thought. And for me, it was a little strange because like in the first couple chapters, it's just like nonstop, and they're trying to like, it feels like they're trying to do like every single thing, and then it feels like it really tapers off for most of the middle of the book, and then like ramps back up again, and that was a little weird. But I don't know. I guess I'm kind of ambivalent on it.
So this is the first time where I read a book where it just wasn't straight sex, like straight people having sex. So this was like different for me. So I enjoyed that factor of it. Um, but I did like the, I guess, the concept of like the sex being used as power, like in the Emperor's Palace, the courier was really using like Dong was really using this to like gain information and solidify his like standing in the palace. So and like a lot of characters kind of throughout the book kind of used it as power. So that was interesting to see too. But yeah, there was a lot of it, and I think the author was very, found a lot of different ways to describe things. So I found that funny at times too.
It was cute at first when it was like novel and brand new, but as the book dragged on, it was just getting like tedious to read about like his stiffness and his pink plum or whatever. Um, yeah, I know that it served a purpose in the book. Um, like what So said, how it was used as a power play sometimes to solidify um, Dong Shan's place in the palace. But what got me the most was when they were in the Emperor era and Dong Shan was going down on the Emperor, on Lu Jin, and I was like, you're going down? Like the general idea I have of the past is that people weren't as clean as they were now. So I'm like, you're going down on him? That's kind of gross. That's kind of disgusting. Um, yeah, that's it. Uh, it was cute at first, got tiresome by the end.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of you guys. I think the sex in the beginning was kind of nice. I think it definitely helped me be a bit more invested in the story. And I think, to Saul's point, it really sets up who Dongshen, the courtier, is in the 4 BCE timeline. I think he's kind of just meant to be this like opportunistic gay man. And like by all the sex he's having, it definitely comes across that he is that way. So I think it really does a good job of showing the kind of person he is, which makes sense for how their story ends. Um, but it seemed like after the first couple of chapters, we kind of forgot about that, except for the Dongshen storyline, which I thought was interesting. I expected in an erotic novel to have more sex. And yet it felt kind of like the author's best writing was during the sex scenes, and like everything else was like, you know? Um, and I think to Arian's point, I always do kind of find gay sex in television or film or in novels kind of funny because I think, as we all know, there's a certain step that majority of us take when having gay sex that, like, it seems like a lot of novels are kind of afraid to address. So I thought that was kind of funny. I was kind of hoping the author would touch on that, but he didn't. Um, so yeah. And I guess a follow-up question to that would be, would you consider this novel to be a story about love or a story about lust?
I would say it is a lusty story. Uh, I just didn't feel that there were any like real actions that to me were like this is love. This is like actual like sacrifice or like working to like compromise and like understand someone because you care about being together, and just a lot of like just a lot of like longing and not for like the reasons that I would put in for love.
Yeah, to me, it seemed more like lust. There was definitely throughout the book, like the premise of love, and I thought that that was going to develop much more as we got the Emperor and Dong to meet. So I was waiting for this like reason of why they were so in love that I thought that even that they must have like other lifetimes even before they were at that endless palace. I thought that there was going to be this other like big reveal about like why their love was so great that we didn't get. So it was definitely more less to me. Although in the way that it was written, I expected this love, and then that didn't quite deliver.
It was definitely lusty for me. Um, I almost exclusively read romance novels before this, so um, what what I need in a romance, or what I think is a hallmark of romance, is the build-up. There needs to be like a gradual increase. I mean, a sudden start, or like, just a spark, a boom is also fine, but you have to work with that as well. This book did it had a boom, but I don't think it worked with it well. Um, so like it's supposed to be this super great love that transcends time and life or whatever, but then you have one of them cheating on the other, and then the betrayal, and then I get that's supposed to be the twist, the gag of it all, and how they were like, I don't know, uh, not poly, but like, I don't even know how to explain it. And then the river one just felt super lusty and shallow. Uh, I don't know if I got the timelines mixed up, but your Calvin fell in love with him in like what, 1 or 2 days, like just after they hooked up. From their hooking up in peril to their night at the art museum thingy. Um, it was kind of crazy to me. And for Julat, I hope I'm saying that right. And Heshikan, um, they just, even the story says it, I think, um, or at least impl- it's it's 5 a.m. I have 4 hours of sleep. I'm sorry, y'all. But in the Heshikan story, um, it was it was definitely more lusty than romancy. I'll end it there. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like I said earlier, still don't really understand what about their love was so strong. Not to jump ahead of ourselves too much, but I think that knowing how the story between the innkeepers, not the innkeeper, I'm sorry, the courtier and the emperor ends, with essentially the courtier never was really in love with the emperor. The he just wanted to be important to the palace. So that's fine, but I don't understand why the emperor was so in love with the courtier. Because it seemed like their only connection was sex. So I have to say, yeah, I think that primarily it's a story about lust and like the dangers of lust, especially as we move further along in the story, you begin to see just the how dangerous the lust these characters have for each other is to like how their stories end. And it seems like everyone's like primary like mistake is like who you sleep with. Um, so yeah, I will say a story about lust. Also, I have to say to Arian's point about Calvin falling in love with River so quickly, I think I'm not someone who likes instant love stories. I've read a fair amount of romance and a fair amount of erotic novels, but I don't like it when characters meet and like immediately they're in love. So maybe there are certain aspects of the love story that I'm just kind of not wanting to pay attention to, but I think overall it's a story about lust. Um, and I guess I'm curious, what did you guys all think of the author's ability to world build in this story and of course each timeline?
Um, I can go. Uh, it felt a little bit more fleshed out in the present day, I think, than in some of the others. Or maybe it didn't feel as complete in the middle timeline to me as it did in the other two. Um, but even when I was reading, I think I mentioned this earlier, I didn't envision like too much of a huge difference in terms of setting. Like obviously one is like in a palace and one is like in an old inn in the woods, but outside of that, I didn't envision too much different, like in terms of environment between the first two.
I was gonna say that to me, it seemed like the earlier timelines were a little bit more built out, and maybe it was because the current time was just so much more basic than what maybe the author was trying to do for the earlier timelines, where there seemed to be a lot of like a lot more for us to know or like to have to know. But I do think that there was a lot of missing parts kind of throughout all the stories. Um, like one thing that wasn't resolved for me that I kept wanting to know more was that it seemed like at some point the Empress was also a nine-tailed fox, and I wanted to know more about that, and also like her whole romance with the other princess. Like I wanted to know more about that, and like I thought that maybe that would contribute somehow to the love story, or to like the fact that later the emperor was also a nine-tailed fox. Like there was a lot of missing things for me that I thought would get answered by the end that didn't. So those that were definitely missing for me.
Uh, yeah, it felt like in terms of world building, the innkeeper was the best. And that's probably why it was my favorite out of all of them. Um, I loved the setting of the forest and the woods and the innkeeper, and the inn, and like the kind of the separatedness from the nearest town. I think that was the most um, that a physical location was described or setting. Other than the present with the Songkran temple, I think that was the yeah. But despite that, I didn't like how the present setting um, was just uh, I don't know. I guess I it was out of touch for me. Of just not pleasant, and the palace, the emperor one, it was just in the middle of the road. I wish they did more to show his Dongshan's craftiness or his more opportunistic side in a way that made him seem like he was sly, he was smart, he was kind of like a spy. He was giving Black Widow fantasy. Um, but yeah, I feel like the now let me end it there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the world building was definitely lacking for me. I didn't really understand the the juxtaposition between the heavy fantasy elements in the 4 BCE timeline and the 1740 timeline, but seemingly a lack of fantasy elements in the present day storyline. I was kind of wondering, okay, does that mean that these different mystical creatures and abilities all kind of faded out as society moved on? Or, is there some reason as to why these fantasy elements only exist in these other timelines? Especially, I'm thinking of the animals mentioned in all three timelines. Like we know in the 4 BCE timeline, there is this like blue cat, there's a blue horse in the 1740, but there doesn't seem to be any mystical animals in the present day storyline. So I don't know. And there were even talking animals in the 4 BCE timeline. Um, so yeah, and I think I was a little bit confused as to why the author chose to write the River and Joey storyline in the present day as opposed to in the future. I think the future would have made more sense, especially because with Winston, he has certain technologies that we don't have yet. So how could that be in the present? I think that was done to kind of show just how rich Winston is. He has access to things that we don't. But I think that storyline would have been a lot more interesting, and the author could have included more fantasy elements had he just set River and Story in the future. But, you know. And then I guess a follow up to that question is, were the rules to how each timeline worked clear to you with the fantasy elements?
I'll I'll say for me that they weren't very clear. Um, and I don't like, especially thinking in like the Emperor timeline, like we know there's something like going on there with the grandma. And then like the thing with the fox, and yeah, we like never hear anything about her being a fox ever again. I don't know, it was a little confusing. And I think the only, correct me if I'm wrong, do we see any in the present timeline other than when River has like that weird like seizure premonition? But even then, like I'm not like, is River a nine-tailed fox in this, like, I don't know. But I think part of that, the fox thing, someone else mentioned just now, who was a little confusing for me, and even outside of that, I don't know that I was even trying to like keep track of how the rules and the magic worked, and that's probably because it was like not super clear to me, but also possible that I missed something, and that's why.
Yeah, I don't think that that was really answered, Michael. I also, Jonathan, would have loved the River timeline to be in the future. I think that that would have been really cool to like have it be more, I don't know, for lack of a better word, futuristic. I think that that would have been really cool. Um, yeah, but I definitely think that there was some things missing. The other thing that I was thinking about too, like with just talking about the nine-tailed fox again, was, and I only know about the nine-tailed fox from like this book, and also because I think like it's in Naruto a nine-tailed fox. But like in the storyline, how it's supposed to bring uh like this destruction of like villages or of just like the destruction of men. So it was really interesting for the Empress to be a nine-tailed fox, and then to have this like betrayal of the Emperor in the second timeline also be this, you know, this thing that's bringing down um, the innkeeper. And so thinking about like who would have been the nine-tailed fox in the present timeline, I don't know if there really was like a clear person who the nine-tailed fox could be. Um, so I wish that there was that kind of like closure as to that imagery and that folk tale of the nine-tailed fox. I think that that was missing a little bit.
Go ahead, Ariane.
Okay, thank you. Um, yeah, the rules are kind of all over the place, I guess. I think in the middle of the book, or near the end, they tried to explain the rules a bit more, um, with how the emperor was so betrayed, he decided to like not be reborn, but wait in like a limbo kind of state, and chose revenge, and that's why he was reincarnated into the fox spirit. But then after the fox spirit died, how did that continue? Uh, I think it was Jonathan who brought it up earlier, but like, uh, did the magic just fade? How did the magic continue? Um, why did it die out? And then the jade heirloom seal, um, it was brought up to be so important, but correct me if I'm wrong, there wasn't anything important about it. It's supposed to break the curse, but like, how? You're just supposed to snatch it from Winston, but then what? What do you do then? Do you connect the jade piece, the broken off jade piece that you have on your bracelet to like break the curse or something? And then the jade piece, um, the weird energy emanating from it. What was up with that? Uh, how the person kept their memories. I thought maybe it might have been because of the jade piece, because Joey remembered and he had the jade piece, but apparently it wasn't like that because Zhu Lang had the jade piece. He remembered, but then, oh wait, or maybe, yeah, but I don't think they made the jade piece the reason why they remembered. But yeah, the rules were kind of just very loose.
Yeah, I didn't really get it either. It wasn't really clear to me if in the different timelines, more so in the 1740 timeline and the 4 BCE timeline, are all of these mystical abilities and beings something that like everyone in the world knows about? Is it something that just people in the palace understand? That wasn't very clear. Uh, and yeah, like I said earlier, what happened to all of the fantasy elements in the present day? Why don't we get any of those? Is there a reason behind that? So yeah, all of that wasn't really clear, and I think the author could have definitely used, along with the world building, a bit more time to kind of set up the rules and like how these different storylines interconnect. Um, and I guess before we move on into the 4 BCE timeline, I'm curious, were you guys able to identify each character's counterpart in all of the timelines?
I think so. I think that the commander Jujun was the um the doctor, Dr. Yewang, I think that was his name, and then was Winston later on. That was a twist to me that I didn't expect that. Um, and then the emperor was Juling and later River, and then Joy was the innkeeper and the courtier. I was wondering if Kevin was supposed to be anyone, and if that was like somebody else that was throughout, but it didn't seem like he had a counterpart. It also didn't seem like the Empress had a counterpart. So I wasn't expecting that every single person had to have a counterpart. I really thought that it was just going to be the Emperor um, and Dongxing that had counterparts, but then seeing that um, the commander Zhu Zheng also had a counterpart, I was like, okay, is everyone connected? Oh, because then the maybe one of the later characters that was the one of the people that he went to party with that was also from Nicaragua. He was supposed to maybe be the philosopher at the very end. That was confusing.
Yeah, I think I got all the same ones and had a similar question. Like, I really wanted, because there were a few things Calvin said that made it seem like he, like, maybe had some sort of like awareness or something, or I don't know, maybe like he was somewhere else in one of the other timelines, but there wasn't to me like a very clear connection. I also wanted the Empress to like show back up, and I guess was she supposed to be like the sick grandma in the second timeline, but then we just don't see her in the last one at all. And I had a thought about Calvin. I'm curious to know what you guys think, but there's like a lot of imagery with peaches, even outside of like all of the sexual references about peaches and plums. But there's like in the 1740 timeline, doesn't he meet someone in the woods and they like share a peach and have some like magical little evening, and then the first time Calvin and River meet, he is giving him those pills with the little peaches on them, and I was like, maybe Calvin is this guy, but that's all I thought. And I was disappointed on the animals too, because I wanted like a real blue animal in the last one, and I think all we got was like a butterfly in like the next to last page.
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, I was just gonna ask what the question was, so you could go ahead first.
The question was, were you able to identify each character's counterpart throughout all of the timelines?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you could go first if you want.
For me, I think that Joey was, of course, obviously Joey. He was also the courtier, Dong Shen, in the 4 BCE timeline, and he was the innkeeper in the 1740 timeline. I think that River was himself, River was the emperor, and River was the fox spirit in the 1740 timeline. I think that Winston was the Empress, and Winston was the grandmother. And I think that Calvin was himself. Calvin was the commander in the 4 BCE timeline, and Calvin was also the doctor. Who I was most confused on was Garden, because it's mentioned briefly in the present day storyline that Calvin remembers her, but I don't remember any counterpart of counterpart of Rivers having a sister or having a close confidant or anything like that. So it wasn't really clear to me who she was supposed to be. But then it kind of seemed like maybe Garden was the cat and the horse. Um, so maybe, but also I don't remember any significant relationship between Calvin and the horse or Calvin and the cat in any of the storylines. So I'm a little confused on Garden, but like Saul said, maybe every single character is not meant to have a counterpart. But if that's the case, then why did Calvin remember her? I don't know. What do you think, Arian?
Um, I guess I'd have to agree with Saul. I don't think every character was gonna have a counterpart because I thought that Calvin was new and that Garden was new because I didn't find any of them to have like a connection to any of the past stories. So I think that was like one of the new things that the modern story had going for it. Um, I I could connect that um, that Rivers and Joey's timelines. I mean, they were the main characters, so it had to be distinct. But I kind of started getting them confused by the end. Like, oh, was the Fox River? Was it Joey? Was the Emperor River, or was it Joey? Because like after the twist, I kind of started second guessing myself. Um, I did recognize that Jujun was Winston, but then I also initially thought that Winston was the Dowager Fu, but he was definitely the bad guy in the inn. I um yeah, I liked how they added new characters to make the story more distinct, the present story more distinct. But then uh, the way they added or tried to incorporate some past characters, like the old advisor as the trippy guy from the van in Bank in Thailand, was kind of it kind of felt half hearted, like just to throw him in there. Like, oh yeah, this is a reference to the guy, that old advisor guy from the Emperor's Story. Do you remember him? Because I do. Um, yeah, it was clear at times, other times it wasn't that um, distinct or clear cut.
Yeah, I wonder too, um, if some of these like connections were really meant as also like kind of like this magical aura that the characters had throughout their lifetimes. Like, I agree with Arian when you said that. Like, I didn't quite like that Calvin just immediately fell in love with River because also River was such a flat character. But I wonder if like that his attraction to him was because of this aura that River has, even though he doesn't have it, that like the emperor is still like he's still the emperor. So like there's still this sense and this like energy about him that people are attracted to because of that. And also with the at the very end with that trippy guy, which I also agree kind of was a throwaway, and the author probably like didn't need to make him the old philosopher. But I wonder too if like maybe he wasn't the old philosopher, but like in this like again in this like energy that they were going into in the jungle, and with River getting closer to Joey and also to the heirloom seal, if like those energies were just like around. So like maybe he wasn't that old philosopher, but he was just getting this like aura of like mysticism almost that's going on. So I wonder if too if that like contributes to the characters. And I also wonder what you all think with the fact that the two earlier timelines were really like from like really like Joey's perspective, right? From like the innkeeper and the courier, and then like the present timeline is River. I think that maybe if the present timeline was more in like Joey's perspective, that maybe would have been more exciting, or that they would have been more questions that were answered because he was the one that remembered. So I wonder too if that might have made things easier to keep track of too, if that present timeline was almost through Joey's rather than River's perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I think that maybe the last storyline being told through Joy's perspective would have made that storyline more interesting. But I mean, I do think that I would have wanted River's point of view at some point, but I do think River's point of view during the Fox Spirit timeline would have been the perfect time for that. I think I'm just still so confused, and we will get there when we get to the 1740 timeline, but I'm still so confused about that whole setup between his grandmother holding him captive. And I think having the story told through his timeline would have made more sense. And we could have got those questions answered. But to ask Saul's question, what did everyone think about the final POV being in Joey's point of view instead of Rivers? In Rivers' point of view instead of Joey's, I mean.
To be honest, by that point of the book, I I almost didn't care. So it was just like, oh, okay, cool. This is kind of new. This is a fresh take. Uh, I didn't know how to feel about it. I feel like if it was done earlier, it could have had um, more of an impact to me. Um, like what you said, the Emperor story, it could have really benefited from Rivers, yeah, from Rivers' point of view, um, or I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm getting the timelines mixed up. I'm sorry, but yeah, I don't really have much to say on it. Um,
Uh, I'll I'll just say I thought it was kind of weird them all not being from like the same person's point of view, and it made it like a little difficult to follow, I think. But I don't know. I actually think that Joey's point of view may have been more interesting in the last one than Rivers. But I don't know if we could have gotten all of the same things just from Joey's point of view.
Okay. And now we can go ahead and move into the 4 BCE timeline. I guess general thoughts. What did we all think of the timeline between the courtier and the emperor? Also, just a note, I'm probably not going to use anyone's names outside of River and Joey simply for so I don't mispronounce anything, but also to kind of not confuse anyone. But you guys can use names if you want. But anyway, what did you guys think of the courtier and the emperor? General thoughts on their storyline?
I thought it was cute. I love how it the cut sleeve, the torn sleeve, that it gave a story to that. Um, I liked how it really tried to incorporate the historical aspect to it um, on many aspects, like the language, the social norms and structures, I guess. But it really went all downhill the moment that River. Let me just say, it all went downhill the moment the emperor left the room. I checked out of that story. It was very, oh, okay, so this is where it's going. Um, yeah, it was it was cute. That's it.
I'll agree with Arian. I thought it was cute. Um, I some of like and I think we mentioned this in the others too, but just like the quote unquote falling in love, like timelines are a little bizarre. Um, and I did like that in this one we got a lot more like backstory on what for the courtier at least like what helped shape him, but we didn't really get that for the emperor, which I wish we had got a little bit more of. Like I don't think we even hear about like his parents or anything. We see his grandma all the time and like all of her shenanigans, but um I don't know. I would have been nice to like maybe have some more backstory or character building for Emperor 2 since we see him later in the story as other people, but that's my general thought.
Yeah, I like the Emperor timeline. It had a lot of drama in it, which I really liked. With the courtier really trying to make his way up the line and everything that he was doing to try to get there. I thought that that was really interesting, and I loved the drama of it all. Like when they were having that the celebration for his dad, and the Empress just like flatly said, I can't remember exactly what she said, but then it was very clear um, to the Emperor at least that this was all kind of a ploy. So I love that kind of the Empress was very much like a bad bitch, in my opinion. She was really out there doing whatever she wanted. Um, so I like that part of it. I also, right, I read the very end, the acknowledgments, and learned that this was actually based on real people. So that was also really interesting to me, and I wonder how much, because I didn't do any more research on this, but I wonder how much of it was like how many liberties the author took in writing their story, because when they um at the scene where they like the empire was chanting the courtier's name, like if that really happened, I think that that is like an amazing thing that this like gay relationship was accepted in this kingdom of the past. So I found that really awesome. Obviously maybe that's not how it is, but I thought that that was really cool that there was this like acceptance, or like everybody knew type of deal. And they would, maybe it was because it was attached to the emperor that people were just okay with it. Yeah, so I found that interesting that that kind of was played out, and then the people were just like the Empress just being like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna get the Emperor a man so that he can rule the empire. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how I feel about the Emperor and the Courtier timeline. Uh, I think just overall, since this is meant to be the first time that these two characters meet and fall in love, I was just really wanting a bit more love and romance, which I know we've already talked about, but I think that was really needed in this timeline because that sets up everything else. Um, and and yeah, but I mean, it was fine. And to Saul's point, yeah, these characters are based on real people. I did a lot of research, and I'll just say that majority of what the author included is true, except for, of course, the fantasy elements. But their story gets a lot more interesting after the emperor dies, and I really would have loved to have the author include a lot of that. Um, but but yeah, I think that would have also helped make a lot more sense of what the courtier does once the emperor dies, which I think is kind of mentioned as like a throwaway line at the end of the story, which I was a little bit confused about. But yeah, and they were fine. Just we could have used a lot more, in my opinion. Um, and I guess I'm just so curious. Why was it so important to the Empress that her grandson was seduced? And why do you think it had to be the courtier out of all the men available in the palace and then even outside of the palace?
I'll take a stab at the first part to start. Um, I think sometimes there is like this, maybe a little bit of like a, I don't even want to call it a balance, but this kind of sexual thing with like men in power wanting to not necessarily, or just people in general wanting to like step out of that in like sexual or romantic situations, and maybe that's part of it. Um, Also, I don't know why it had to be Courtier. I guess just because of the rumors about him like having a big dick and being good at sex. But other than that, I have no idea.
Yeah, to me, it was like about the rumors that were surrounding the carrier career, and yeah, like how Michael said, and how good at sex he was. Um, but I wonder too if there was some like thing like with his family being in the empire for so long. Yeah, I wish that there was a better answer to that as to like why it had to be him. And again, like how I had kind of mentioned about River in the later timeline. Um, but like with Joey too, like maybe there's also this energy about him, about, I know maybe his sexual prowess or something like that, that just kind of moves from timeline to timeline. Um, and I don't know why it was. I think maybe like the Empress wanted her grandson to be seduced, maybe just because she wanted the power of that. Like she wanted to be the one that chose who it was, um, and to be able to like dictate everything that happened. I think she just maybe wanted to be in power.
Um, I feel like um, he just got lucky. Like, oh, ignoring, like taking into account his reputation and how it preceded him. Um, he got lucky because the Empress was just throwing men to the Emperor. Like, she said that. And then the commander also said that, oh, my army has the finest men that the Emperor picks from. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess he was just the next one in the rotation. Um, I just like to add though that it's kind of interesting that oh, this the entire time that Dowager Fu was in the picture, I just thought that she held more animosity towards the Emperor for some reason. Like, I just felt it that way. Um, so it's kind of crazy to me how it just dissipated without any like total pushback or um, kind of like climax to the whole thing. Because the way I saw it, there were two different factions to it, the Emperor half and the Fu half, and that one of them had to succumb to the other. So when River acted as a mediator, it was just no uh, when the court Tissa just acted as a mediator, I was just like, oh, okay. Wig. Um, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it wasn't really clear to me why the emperor had to be seduced, especially like Arian mentioned. The empress has tried before, and the emperor wasn't interested in anyone that she had brought to him. Um, I was also a little bit confused as to why the the person doing the seduction had to be a man. I mean, yeah, sure, I'm sure the empress knew her grandson was gay, but it's like the whole point of an emperor entering into a relationship is not for love, it's to produce an heir. And of course, we know that two men, or at least in this fantasy story, can't do that. So why would she have wanted him to be with another man is interesting to me. It would have made more sense had she been trying to set him up with a woman to seduce him, and then in the middle of that, he fell in love with the courtier. Um, but I guess that's me trying to make a whole new story. But that would have made a lot more sense to me. Um, Also, yeah, I'm not really sure why it had to be the courtier. I think, and then I'm even more curious because it's revealed at the end that the emperor knew of the courtier's deal with his grandmother the entire time. So it wasn't like he was ever under the impression that they were genuinely starting a relationship. He always knew the hidden agenda. So I'm kind of curious what allowed him to let his guard down so much with the courtier. And I'm thinking maybe it's just because the courtier, unlike the other men who are rich, who are incredibly physically fit, incredibly charming, blah blah blah, he's actually someone that is smart, because we know that he originally agrees to start meeting him to go over poetry. So maybe that's it, but outside of that, wasn't really sure why it had to be the courtier, and what made them fall in love. And I guess my follow-up question to that is, why do you think that when the emperor's cousin, the commander, first meets the courtier and he automatically understands the deal between the courtier and his grandmother, why didn't he just tell him in the beginning as opposed to claiming to wait like he did? Did that make any sense to you why he didn't just tell him in the beginning?
That was hard for me to keep track of. Like, and I honestly at this point I also don't really know. Like, because at the beginning it seemed like the commander was against the relationship, but in the middle of it, it seemed like he knew, like he wanted that to happen and was in cahoots with the empress. And in the like middle ish, it seemed like he really didn't like the courtier. So I was really confused with all of that. And also at the very end, like the betrayal of them having sex, like that really upset me. I didn't think that that was going to be the twist of the book, and it ruined, like the possibility of that happy ending. So that was upsetting to me.
Yeah, to answer your question, Jonathan, I'm not really sure why. Like, I don't think he had a real advantage to withhold that information. So that part doesn't really make a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with Michael. Just okay, wow. You knew this entire time? Um, why didn't you do anything about it? Well, what was your plan? Oh, yeah, it was just there.
Did you want to share more, Michael?
Oh, no, that was it. Sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't really clear to me either. I don't know. I mean, the whole commander's motivations were really confusing to me. Yeah, and even at the end, I'm still don't really get it. To Saul's point, though, I mean, I wasn't really upset that the commander and the courtier ended up having an affair. I expected it, just considering knowing the kind of person the courtier is, and then their first encounter is obviously, at least in my opinion, very, very sexually charged. So I was expecting that. Although what did bother me is kind of when they do have sex, uh, the lines of consent are like really, I don't even want to use the term blurred because I think it's pretty clear, at least to me. In the beginning, the courtier is obviously saying no, and like fighting back, but the commander kind of rapes him, which I found confusing. And I also really don't like it when authors do that in sex scenes, like a character is being sexually assaulted and then they just kind of give in because it starts to feel good. I think that's really gross. So that upset me, but I don't know. The affair didn't really bother me. What did you guys all think of that affair? I know Soul you already shared, but Michael and Aaron, what did you two think about that?
Um, it didn't make complete sense to me. Like, I guess the reasoning behind it. It felt very much just like based on physical attraction. And the thing you're noting about the sex scene, I picked up on too. And there's a part before this even happens where the commander says something like, well, like something about you just makes me want to like take advantage of you or something along those lines. And I was not expecting that to actually happen in the story. But yeah, I guess I don't necessarily mind the affair, but I just am not like understanding why it's a thing. But then again, maybe it's just because of who the courtier is and what he's used to doing to get ahead in court.
Yeah, there's nothing that like kind of gets under my skin more than a cheating plot. It's kind of, especially for a romance, one that's so great and transcendent of timelines of lives. Like, um, I think that really, um, the addition of that was to the detriment of the story. Like, it just threw the whole thing off. It really shattered like any chance the story had of like sticking the land. Um, I I mean the hints were there because like I agree with I agree that all their meetings were like kind of, it had a hint of tension. It had a little shimmy to it. But I didn't expect them to actually go through with it. Like when the courtier was like, "No, stop! Stop in the name of your oath." Um, I really thought that would be that, but then he gave in so easily. It was kind of like, um, okay, wow, work, I guess. Um, yeah, just really, um, it was a choice. Choices were made. Also, agree with the dubious consent thing. That was kind of icky. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, to me at that point, that was the point to me that I was like, oh, so you're not in love with the emperor? Like, there was always this other attraction that he had. I also didn't like the whole like consent not fully being there. Um, and it like made not the consent thing, but their attraction or made more sense in some of the other storylines where it seemed like there was this like mystical, again, non-consensual thing, like the doctor putting a spell on the innkeeper, and later it also kind of seemed like Winston had kind of that thing with Joey, or at least that like power dynamic. Um, but again, like that want to be with these other like characters that like the reader thinks are evil or like the antagonist. So yeah.
And I guess one final question before we move on to the other timelines. It's revealed at the end that essentially the entire reason the courtier was ever brought to the palace is because his father gave him away, knowing that the empress would try to set him up to seduce her grandson so that he can get a promotion. That whole twist made zero sense to me, especially knowing how little, at least it seemed, how little the courtier's father cared for him as opposed to his other brothers. Did anyone else make any sense of that, or did you even understand why the father would have agreed to that in the first place?
I think that the fact the father didn't really care about him in the first place is the very reason why he just gave him up like that. Like, let me trade in my son, who I've never shown any affection to or any attention to, in exchange for a promotion. It kind of made sense. Um, Story wise, like, how did the exchange even happen? Um, how did that even come to be? I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I understand like the point the story's trying to make there to just reinforce like everybody in the palace at some level has like had some part of their life like plotted out or schemed by somebody in a higher position of power. But saying it like this, I agree that it made like no sense, because just like logistically, some of the things that were suggested, I'm like, you would have to like know all this stuff like before he was even born, or like when he was a small child, and you wouldn't have been able to like know or force any of those things at that point.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you have said. Like, if he, like what you were just saying, Michael, like, how would they have known that the courtier was going to have this reputation around the palace? And right, like, it just seemed like too many things fit into place correctly, and maybe it was because they were all planned, but it didn't make too much sense.
Yeah, I'm still trying to make sense of that myself. I think it was Arian who said a really good point that I agree with, that since the father didn't really care much for the courtier to begin with, he was totally fine to use him as a stepping stone to get the family to like a higher place in the palace, which makes a lot of sense. I didn't really consider that, but yeah. And before you move on, I do kind of want to check in time-wise a little bit. We're approaching an hour and a half, and like always, I have plenty of more questions. We're close to being halfway through with my questions, but there's a lot more. I just kind of want to see where everyone else is time-wise. Are you guys okay to continue? Or maybe you guys have other things you have planned for the rest of the day? Essentially, just how much more time are you willing to stay today?
I had just planned to stay till 3. I do have something to do after that. Or sorry, 3 my time, so like another 35 minutes.
I can be flexible and am happy to prioritize anything that Soul might want to bring up before in the next 35 minutes.
Yeah, definitely agree. Prioritizing Saul's questions and stuff since he's time limited. But yeah, I could stay till the end.
Okay. So I guess, Saul, since you do have the limited schedule today, is there anything you really are dying to talk about before we move on? Because I'm not totally sure within the next 35 minutes we'll get to the end of the story. So is there anything you're like dying to talk about before you go?
No, I'm just happy to continue talking about whatever questions that you had. Um, yeah, like I said, I like the book a lot, so I'm like really enjoying hearing like what other people thought about the book, and um, yeah, so whatever people want to talk about.
Okay. Then we can go ahead and move on into the 1740 timeline. Uh, General thoughts on the innkeeper and the fox spirit. What is everyone's thoughts there?
I felt like this timeline had the most potential of the three to sort of like flush out a lot of maybe some of the missing details. And I did really like the inclusion of the fox spirit, even if the rules weren't super clear. Um, but I also felt with this one, um, maybe the fox spirit is part of the reason, but like the innkeeper just does a bunch of like really weird things. And then we find out later that some of them are just like straight up hallucinations, and he's like not really been doing them, or he's like been like someone had a spell cast on him. Um, I know all of that felt kind of strange, and they're like a little like echo of that weird like non-consent thing, especially with him and the doctor, and then finding out later the doctor like, oh, just like I had you under a spell the whole time, he was a little weird, but those are my general off the cuff thoughts on this one.
I know I said it was my favorite story out of the three, but honestly, that's not saying much of the choices that we've had. Um, yeah, I, the fox spirit. There's this theme of Joey always being the one held captive in the timelines. So when I still thought Joey was a fox spirit, I was like, oh, so the grandmother is a captive. But now I'm not sure if the grandmother was a captive in that timeline, like if she actually was who the fox spirit said she was, or if it was actually the doctor. It was probably the doctor, but like, yeah, that was something that was interesting. The part that I really liked about the story was near the end when he was traveling um, in search of the fox spirit. And he, like, this small glimpse of recognition, and he was like, "Did you find what you were looking for in the forest?" Um, I found it it was kind of touching in like a kind of weird way because the father remembered him out of all those times despite him kicking him out. Um, it was kind of tender, and yeah, it was really cute, that part, at least.
I'm glad you brought that part up, Arian, because I wanted to know what people thought about that part. Um, yeah, that this timeline was my favorite just because of the fantasy components to it, and I think it had a lot in it. I liked the innkeeper's his like desire to like seek the woods and finding out that he was seeking that because he was looking like without knowing for the fox spirit that was the emperor. um and then I found the doctor storyline really creepy and evil, how we find out that he had him under this spell the whole time. So I found that, I mean, gross, but it was like an interesting component to the story that really just showcased. Like it was very unexpected. I thought that the doctor was going to be one of them. Like it was either going to be Joey or River. And I know that you said that you thought that Jonathan, that you thought maybe the doctor was. I can't remember who you said, but I think that it's Winston, and I think that you said it was somebody else. Um, and why I think it was Winston, it was because of that um, flashback that River had, where it was the doctor was performing when he was making that medicine, and he said that he saw Winston's face on the doctor. Obviously, that could also just be his his hallucinations that he saw it that way, and it could have not been the right thing. But I was also a little confused as to the relationship between the fox spirit and the grandmother, and like what was that all about. So I was wondering like if anybody kind of figured that out or not.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Solo, because that was one of my questions. Were you guys able to understand the grandmother's motivations behind holding her grandson captive? Or I guess, do you even believe that that was happening, like Arian said, or do you think that like the fox spirit was lying?
I don't know what to believe. Uh, I I think by like nature of the fox spirit and what we're told about it, we would like be wary of trusting it. But yeah, I don't know if I don't feel like the grandmother was actually holding captive, but maybe I'm wrong. But if not, then like why include it? It's I feel like that's like a strange thing to include that doesn't necessarily serve the storyline. If not, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
To me, it almost seemed like the fox spirit was holding the grandmother captive rather than the other way around. Um, and I'm just like thinking out loud now, but I wonder too, since right, the emperor waited until this time to be reincarnated as the fox spirit, if that maybe like that they had like allowed him to come back into the earth and be reincarnated only if the grandmother character came along with him. So I wonder if that was like one of the reasons or one of the like limitations of him coming back, and that maybe he wasn't able to be or utilize all of his fox abilities when she was there, so trying to get rid of her in order to be like the full fox.
Um, yeah, um, that part of the story was kind of, or at least that aspect of the story was strange. Like the need to kill off the grandmother and then unlocking the sudden power. When I thought it was just her, just kind of holding him in captive. But then that wasn't the case because he was holding her under captive. It was kind of, uh, yeah, I just didn't believe uh, that she was actually his grandmother. Actually, I'd go that far. Like the whole thing of the fox bear is that they're sly, cunning, they're mischievous, they're tricksters. Uh, and I didn't know why the fox spirit had to trick the innkeeper like that. I mean, he was smitten. He was besotted like the moment they laid eyes on each other. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I really like the question that Arian brought up about understanding the motivations between the motivations of the fox spirit. I'm curious, with what we're given in this story, was it clear to everyone what a fox spirit's motivations were, and like kind of yeah, essentially, was it clear what the motivations of a fox spirit are?
To me, at least by the end, it seemed like he came back for kind of that revenge. Like maybe there was some point that he wanted to come back and be for some time with the innkeeper and kind of reignite this love that they had. But at least right at the very end, when he was talking about now you have to be the one that remembers, like that seemed again like going along with the fantasy component of it, but like a curse that he has now put on Joey to like always remember this. And I also had a question thinking of what people thought of. I know that we know that the emperor waited until this lifetime to be reincarnated, but do you all think that the courtier, the innkeeper, like, do you think that there was timelines before that when he got to have more lifetimes in between the emperor being reincarnated? And if so, like, do you think that also like the commander and Winston and maybe the doctor like had also been reincarnated before, like right, this other third party that the betrayal happened with, like, is that also a component that there's more iterations of, or is it truly like these are the three timelines that these lives have been reincarnated in? Because Joey talks about, centuries trying again and again to do this, so it seemed like he has lived for longer than maybe the emperor has.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think to your point, Joey does mention, I believe it was 2,000 different lifetimes they've all been reincarnated into. I do not believe that the 1740 is their second timeline. I think there's like um, several in between the 4 BCE and then the 1740. I just think that because the story is told through Joey's perspective at that point, Joey doesn't remember everything else in the middle. Um, so yeah. And I think in each timeline they're all brought back. It seems like they're all sort of bound to this curse, which again, going back to our earlier question about the rules of how this story works, I don't really get why. I was saving that question for the end, but while you're here, Saul, I guess I'm also curious. Um, why are they all bound to this curse when it seems like it's really just an issue between River and Joey? Why is everyone else consistently involved? And also, yeah, so to Saul's question, do you think there are other timelines besides the three that we get, or is it just these three?
To answer the question about do I think it's just these three, I don't think so. And I'm curious why choose these three in particular. But no, I definitely feel like it has gone through like I don't know about thousands of iterations, but it feels like more iterations than just three.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a lot more iterations than were shown. I mean, for sure. But yeah, I guess I didn't really question it. So yeah, I don't have much to say on it.
Yeah, for your question, Jonathan, as to like why they're bound together, I don't know, right? I think that we were missing a very important part in the Emperor storyline as to like one, why they're so in love, and then maybe that would have brought more clarity as to then why they're bound together. I think one of the reasons why they might be bound together is because of that betrayal at the very end. And again, if there was maybe more story after the big ceremony, that could have also been more um, brought more explanations to it all. But I think it is that betrayal that, and maybe right, because the emperor is supposed to be the son of heaven, he's supposed to be this celestial being, that he has these powers to come back, and that he has just been kind of obsessing over this betrayal, that he is wanting to come back and kind of maybe make River pay, or maybe like I don't know. It just seems like this endless loop, right? And I think that that's one of the main themes of the book, of this endless loop, of these cycles that keep happening again and again. But there doesn't really seem to be a reason as to why they're happening again and again. That I would have liked more clarity on, or maybe one of you caught more onto that.
Um, hmm. I guess before we move on from the 1740 timeline to the present day timeline, um, were you able to understand why the innkeeper became so obsessed with sex with the fox spirit that he ended up like stop functioning as a person? Was that clear to anybody? Because that part really confused me, and I think it kind of destroyed that whole story for me as well.
I feel like a large aspect of it was that the fox spirit is a seductress, or someone who seduces someone in like almost all of its depictions. Like you have Ari and Law, you have the Empress, the Princess Daiji. I don't know if it was touched upon in the story, but the story of the Empress goes, she seduced the Emperor and then caused the entire palace to go into ruin. That's how the story goes, if I remember correctly. So the whole fox thing had this whole magical kind of charm. So it kind of made sense to me. But did it have to end that way? Did he have to die? because he was so crazed for it. I don't know, but that's what that's how I made sense of it.
Yeah, I'll just say that this is one of the parts that I thought was a little weird. Yeah, I don't know why it had to end like this, and just to like think of them. And there was something I think earlier you mentioned, Jonathan, just about like some of the sex not feeling like realistic. And I don't know, maybe it's because he's a fox spirit. He like doesn't um I don't know, like he just like has magical powers. But yeah, this like whole thing where they're like rolling around in the mud having sex. I'm like, I don't know if that's like as possible as the book makes it sound. And just like the whole idea of that does not sound like as fun in real life it is as it is like made out to be in the story. And I would have rather seen the innkeeper like have a downfall or an end that was something different than something Celestial. And this was another part too that definitely reinforced for me that this is like not really, it doesn't feel like a love story. It just feels like a lot of horniness sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Michael. That it does seem like that it's not like right, like the love is not the basis of it all. And again, I just keep going back to maybe this like revenge theme or factor that maybe um the emperor feels like ultimately this sex and lust was the demise of their relationship in the emperor timeline. So now he's trying to also, that's also the demise of this particular relationship in this timeline. So just kind of carrying that kind of theme onward. Um, and I think that he, like Arion said, that the fox spirit is just this uh, spirit that seduces people, and that's how they lead people to their end. So that was the reasoning for me of like why he wanted to keep having sex, why the innkeeper wanted to keep having sex. Is that because he was again under another spell? This seemed like to me um, that's why that was happening.
Yeah, I wasn't really able to make sense of that. But I do believe that yes, Saul and Aaron, you bring up great points that fox spirits essentially exist to be to seduce people. Um, but I didn't really get why the innkeeper was so insistent on continuing to have sex even after the fox spirit kept saying like, no, you have to stop. I would think, wouldn't the fox spirit be able to overpower the innkeeper in that sense, since essentially the innkeeper is like giving in to whatever the fox spirit wants? Um, and then to Michael's point about the realism there, I mean, yes, it's a fantasy story, so I'm not really checking for realism too much, but I was a little bit like, how are you able to have sex that much? Like, how is your dick not fallen off yet? That was like, okay. And then as obsessed as the innkeeper becomes with having sex with the fox spirit, it gets really creepy. It takes like all the sensualness out of the sex scenes and it makes them kind of gross. Because I just imagine like the fox spirit having sex with this like bony, dry skin, like skin and bone figure, and it's not really hot to me. And it seems like the way the sex scenes there are written is that they're meant to be sexy, but like knowing what the innkeeper probably looks like based on the fox spirits descriptions, I don't see how that can be sexy. But whatever. Okay, and to skip into the present day storyline, I know we've already kind of talked about River and Joey a lot, so if you don't have any other general thoughts, that's fine. But if anyone does have any other general thoughts on River and Joey, what are they?
I'll just say I didn't necessarily love that it was like party boy hoe behavior. But again, this is like, you know, a romance fantasy, so maybe I shouldn't be too judgy on that. But yeah, and like the whole like mentioning that River was in med school and then like it doesn't really like come up again, or like that's not like a real significant part of who his character is. Any other part in the story was a little weird. And there's one thing in this timeline that I also thought was just so bizarre. At the first time they go to Winston's house, and then there's like this little cutscene with Angina. It just felt so out of place, and I don't know why it needed to be in the book. Like why just name drop one person in real life in the whole book, but that that was a little bit weird. But I did have a question on this one. If anyone found significance in any of the symbolism, especially when they were partying, it was like every single drug they took had like something that we've seen in the story, and I was trying to make sense of like the colors and symbolism, but it couldn't. I wasn't really finding it as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for you, Michael. I was also trying to find that as to like what that might mean. I think that Ariane had brought this up earlier of like the heirloom seal and like, okay, once Joey gets it, then what? Like that I really didn't get, like why Joey was so obsessed with getting this, and maybe had to do right with like whoever has it has the power or is like the ruler of the kingdom, and the fact that Winston has it is like against what Joey wants it to be, but it's still like because maybe because there was no magic or fantasy in this third timeline, that getting the heirloom sealed at this point just seemed symbolic, in that like Joey's obsession over it didn't quite make sense. Like why not just be with River then? Like you found him, just be with River. Yeah, so that to me I was like, okay, well, he's going to continue to obsess with that and still like lose River in the end.
I don't know if I have, like, I hate to break it to you, Michael, but I don't know if I have an answer to your question either. Uh, but I do agree with you with the doctor aspect, how it's brought up. Uh, Never really played a part, any part in his story. Like the closest thing I could link it to was maybe his parents' expectations on him, but like that's just me reaching real hard because there was nothing of that sort in the book as far as I can remember. Um, but yeah, Saul already brought up what I was going to say, that I did touch upon earlier, but yeah.
Also, I think that you had said this maybe in the chat, Jonathan, but like the stereotypes that were brought up, and I think like one of them being like maybe the perceptions that Asian people are like smart and like go to medical school and all these things. So that kind of seemed like just a stereotype to make a River be going to medical school. Like that just seemed kind of random. Um, I also wonder if that was the author putting himself in that, because I think at one point, like the acknowledgement, he had mentioned that like he was pre-med and then changed to being like a novelist. So maybe he was putting his own self in the character of River. But I found that to just be more stereotypical rather than like bleed anything into the story.
Yeah, to agree with everyone. Unfortunately, Michael, I think you stumped me with that question. I think because I really didn't like River and Joey's storyline so much, I wasn't really as tuned in or as willing to pick up on details as I usually am. I was more so just trying to get through it in terms of their story, so I can get back to the stories I did like. which is why it kind of pissed me off that like we finished the story with them, because I was like, please God, no. But unfortunately, we do. Um, but to your point about River being a doctor, I found it kind of interesting that he is studying to be a doctor. We know he's incredibly smart, blah, blah, blah. Um, so then why is he so willing to take just about every drug that's given to him? I mean, yeah, I'm sure there are obviously people who work in healthcare who do take drugs, but like majority of people who work in healthcare, like, I'm not touching that, you know? So I don't really get why he was so willing. Maybe that's just like you said, Michael, the party boy aspect of him coming through, but I just found it very strange for someone that smart to be so willing to take all these drugs. Um, but whatever. Um, I guess my first question is, what did you all think of in this storyline, Calvin's decision to leave River after he realizes that they can't be together, as opposed to trying to enchant him or whatever the case may have been, as in previous storylines?
I'll say that my response is partly influenced by the comment I made about like the party boy thing, and I think in this timeline, or just in Calvin's story in general, that we get quite a few scenes where he's like River, I don't have to be spending time with you. Like I can go do whatever I want. Like everybody loves me, everybody wants me. I have this like great, fantastic job, and I'm blah blah blah. And that maybe that was just part of Calvin uh, accepting that, or realizing that like even if he wants River, if River doesn't want him back, it's not worth his time. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, to me, it was a contrast to like the leading relationship between River and Joey in all the timelines, as to like they are so like again in this cycle of like going for each other. And I think it's Calvin that says, right, like may be true, but it doesn't mean it's good. Um, that he was like the kind of the comparison of that, or where he was like, okay, well, if this is not gonna happen, then I'm gonna move on. So that kind of like dichotomy of like, oh, this like seamlessly love throughout lifetimes, lust throughout lifetimes, that is bad for the characters, as opposed to someone who is able to be like, okay, like I'm gonna stop this now because I realize that this is one, River's not into me, so I'm just gonna drop that instead of like bewitching him, spelling him like other characters have done in the past. And also that kind of like I know my self worth, so I'm just kind of gonna move on.
I feel like it was because it was the modern version, and they wanted to give it a little something different. Um, the way that I think that Calvin was used as like a foil for the main relationship, for like the past relationships, like, oh, you can walk away. This is kind of just uh, the difference between the two. Like, oh, look at me healthily stopping right now. um, yeah, I'm just no thoughts. Not much thoughts on it.
And before I do share, I know, Sol, you have to go. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share? Any final questions you want to ask before you go?
No, I don't think so. Thanks everyone for sharing your thoughts. It definitely has made me, think a little bit harder in the book. I mean, I still like it. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to the next book that we read. But thanks everyone.
Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah, it
so
was
glad
nice
you came
Thank you for
today.
coming.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, what was the question I asked? What did I think of Calvin's decision? I was finally like, good for Calvin. Someone in this storyline is making a smart decision. But then it confused me why Calvin came back when they go to Thailand, because he made this like big dramatic storm out of like, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm over this now. I don't need this. But then you come back to help him travel across the world to find the guy he really loves. That confused me. And then we get again the conversation where Calvin tells him, I'm going to leave because you don't love me, when they're in Thailand. But that was confusing because we've already had that discussion, and like no one forced you to come along. You didn't have to. So that made me take my compliment to the author of finally having a character make a smart decision back. I was like, I don't get that, but yeah. I'm curious, were you guys able to make any sense of the final orgy scene in Thailand? Was it even clear what was going on there and why?
I'm gonna be honest. I skimmed a lot of the last part, so the fact that there was a scene like that, oh wow, wow. Oh, maybe I should go back and look for it and reread it. But like, that's interesting. Um, no thoughts. Yes.
I'll just say that I thought it was strange. And this was one of those parts we talked about world building a little bit, where like all of a sudden there's like magic back in play out of nowhere, and then like all of this, like really really explicit like sex stuff again. I don't know. I'm not sure. And then I kept wondering too, like all of these people that are involved, are they all people that have like been in some of the other timelines in some fashion? I don't know. It was weird to me.
Yeah, I couldn't make sense of any of that either. And to your point, Michael, it seemed like that was just a last ditch effort to throw in a little bit of magic into this timeline, which I think was the most reality based out of the three. Um, and then I was kind of curious, okay, so what is controlling them? Is it Winston? Is it the heirloom seal? What exactly is making them all become enchanted and then take on River's face and then have sex? And what does that have to do with the curse? Yeah, I don't know.
Oh
Very
yeah, that
confusing.
thing you just mentioned about the heirloom seal also made it really confusing, because we've been told so much about the story that's like it's this great artifact about the emperor, and like it's so important, and then it is used for an orgy at the end of the book. Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't. I maybe I missed something I was supposed to pick up there, but
And I guess I'm curious, did the way the curse works make sense to anyone? I couldn't really understand the curse outside of just trying to torture Joey. Um, did that make sense to anyone?
I'll say not really. It actually wasn't that like that important part of an important part of the story to me, I guess, or it didn't carry as much weight for me as I think it probably should have. So it wasn't really, I think, ever in like the forefront of my mind while I was reading anything.
No, I feel like the author had an idea, um, had the idea of love is just a metaphysical recognition of their past lives, and just decided to roll with it. If the book was a vibe, and he was just there for the ride. I guess. And fair enough. Sure. Um, but I didn't. The curse thing, um, sure, why not?
Yeah, I couldn't really make sense of the curse, and it's funny, Michael, that you brought up the fact that the curse didn't seem super important to the story in your mind, which is funny because that is kind of the precipice of the entire story. So, like, why wouldn't that seem important? It should. Um, so yeah, and it seemed like okay, I can kind of be on River's side with, you find out this man you were in love with and you gave all your riches to when you died, you found out that he was cheating on you the whole time and was never truly loved you the way you loved him, and you want to torture him. Okay, I can be on board with that. But then why are you also locking yourself into it as well? Because it seems like since River can no longer remember all their previous lives, he's destined to be hurt and fall in love in each timeline, which doesn't make sense. Like, why would you set up a scheme to torture your ex, but you're also torturing yourself? Um, that wasn't really clear to me. Uh, and yeah, I think that just harps back to the overarching theme of like the rules in the world building not really being set up well enough for my taste. Also, while we're on the curse, I was assuming the entire time that the Empress was the one that cast the curse, and then we find out that River did when he was Emperor. That just it felt like the author's attempts to put in like a messy twist, but it just came off as like convoluted and like trying to do too much. Did anyone else get that little did anyone else pick up on that? Did you ever think that it was the Empress who set up the curse, not the Emperor?
Yeah, I thought that the Empress would have so much more uh, relevance to the plot, but she didn't really. I mean, aside from putting the court, the courtier in the whole situation and manipulating him, kind of, but like I thought she was more sinister than that. Um, because the whole oh, I plotted the whole downfall of my rival. But turns out she was my lover. Uh, I feel like the throwing that in was kind of too late because I already had this impression of her that she was all evil, sinister. So I really did share this perspective that she casted the curse. I kind of wish she did because it would give her more relevance. But uh, yeah, it kind of surprised me. That's it.
Yeah, I will say sort of on the point Arian just made about the Empress like not really playing that much of a role outside of getting Joey and River together in that lifetime was kind of strange to me. And I wanted her to like do something more, especially after we see her turn into the fox. And also in that scene, I mean, just a little bit of a side note, it mentioned that those are her granddaughters with her, and I'm like, oh, are these like the Emperor's sisters, or I don't know, just that also made me just pause for a second for them to mention that, but you know.
And then I'm curious, since we know that Joey mentions they have shared 2,000 lifetimes together, yet he has still been unsuccessful in his attempts to break the curse. Do you think the curse can be broken? Or do you think there's just uh, some magical curse breaking tool that Joey has not discovered yet?
I think it can be broken, um, but just that they're not like making the choices in any lifetime to do that. But yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Like, it can be. I think it can be broken. They're just not making the choice. Like, the heirloom was supposedly the curse breaker, but what's up with that? Like, what? Nothing really happened from it, so it was just, yeah, just there.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit on the opposing side. I don't know if the curse can be broken, um, because it seems to me that the only way to break the curse is to not violate River's trust in at least one timeline, and that will break the curse. Um, because Joey mentioned at some point early that like there's a betrayal that leads to their death, and that is the curse, is the consistent betrayal in each timeline. But the betrayal in most timelines seems to be Joey sleeping with Winston, or at least lying about having slept with him. And if I was someone who had lived 2000 timelines and I can remember at least most of those timelines, why have I still not figured out just don't sleep with Winston and then I'll be okay? Which makes me think either Joey is like really, really stupid, or the curse really just comes down to who they fundamentally are as people. And since we know in the original timeline, the courtier is an opportunist, Joey is destined to be an opportunist in each timeline and kind of do whatever it takes to get what he wants, regardless of whether or not it hurts River. Um, so like I think that's just the key to the curse. There's no heirloom seal. That doesn't matter. None of that matters. All that matters is honesty and trust. And it seems like Joey isn't capable of doing that in each timeline. Um, I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Um, Hearing you explain makes me want to agree with you, and I definitely did pick up on like the. I don't know why I didn't question it as much. Maybe I was just like definitely reading for fun at that point, but like realizing that Joey can remember, and like knowing that he is still doing things in this lifetime that seem to be like really indulgent, is a little weird to reconcile, especially as we get towards the end of the book. Um, but yeah, maybe it is just about who they are as people, and that's not ever going to change, because obviously Joey is not changing, even though he has lived for millennia.
Um, I think you guys have said what I wanted to say, so um, I'll just sum it up in 2 words. Primarily in response to Jonathan. Um, Drag him. That's it.
uh, yeah, gosh. And it seemed kind of strange that the author chose to include all of that, because I'm like, okay, then why haven't these characters figured it out? Or is that meant to be like a message for us as readers? Like, hey, be faithful or be honest. I don't know. I didn't really get the inclusion of that, because I feel like it then makes all your characters seem really stupid. And why as a writer are you writing stupid characters? I don't know. Um, why do you think that Joey was so insistent upon lying to River about his relationship with Winston? Because it seems like at the beginning, when they first met, River is told by several people what their relationship is, and he's okay with it, but the only reason that he is betrayed is because Joey keeps lying. Why do you think Joey lies so much?
I think maybe Joey thinks he's got it figured out. Maybe that um yeah, I could just do this and I don't have to drag him in it until it's ready. Because I think throughout multiple times of the story he's like, um, I shouldn't have met you or stuff like that. but no thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I also don't understand Joey's motivation for being dishonest, especially because Rivers seems very much okay with the situation. Yeah, I'm confused.
And I do kind of want to touch on something that Joey says. Uh, Joey confirms that in each timeline he's in love with Winston, which I found odd because, at least from the timelines that we get, Winston either enchants him to love him or he rapes him. So I'm a little bit confused as to how he loves him. Like, I can understand him saying he's bound to him in some way, but where do you get love out of the 1740 and the 4 BCE timeline? Um, which makes me question why he thought he loved Winston. Did that make sense to anybody at all? Or am I just like being crazy?
It does make sense to me. And I don't know why he thinks he loves Winston.
I think this is just like the prime example, or like, yeah, the prime example of this book, or why I got the impression that this book was really lusty instead of lovey. It was definitely a choice that was made during the drafting of this book. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really get that. Again, that just makes me question the author's intentions there. Because based on what we've got, I don't see how you could have possibly got that you love Winston, but whatever. Uh, hmm. Okay, well, that's all I have on that storyline. I have some more questions, but before we move on from River and Joey, uh, any final thoughts on these two as a couple?
I'm just glad we're done talking about them.
Yeah, no other thoughts from me.
Yeah, my final thought was like, is there any way we can just like kill them both and be done with this? But they're gonna probably be reborn anyway, so they're doomed forever. Okay. um, I'm curious, do you guys believe in the concept of reincarnation? And then if you do, what or who do you believe you were in a previous life?
I can start and give the the not fun answer. I don't know if I believe in reincarnation. I don't. I'm not. I just feel like we, like in general, as people, like always do a bunch of like silly or stupid things, even though we like know not to do them. And I feel like if we really are being reincarnated, why are we not avoiding some of those mistakes or like internalizing some of those lessons on a deeper level? But yeah.
I don't believe in reincarnation either, but like entertaining the thought, if I were to be reincarnated, I think I'd be like, in the eras that we're given, in the innkeeper, I think in all the lives I'd just be like the ordinary mundane person, which is kind of sad to think about. But that's the current reality I'm living in right now. So it makes sense for my past lives to reflect that, wouldn't it? Um, so yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. I think at the danger of coming off as crazy, I do believe in reincarnation. I think that is kind of what I think the meaning of life is. That's a much larger conversation, so I won't go in depth there, but I really do. I've had some like past life regression readings done, and most times I've come back as being a scholar in each of my lives, which I think makes a lot of sense to me, considering just like I want to know everything and I want to like have all the knowledge in the world. So that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I really do believe in reincarnation. And I want to kind of steal the question you asked me, Michael, on Discord. Uh, if every character in a romance novel made smart decisions, would that be a good book? Or do we need characters to make stupid decisions to make a book interesting?
My answer is actually going to kind of tie in with my answer on the reincarnation thing, and I think that we do need the stupid decisions because it makes it easier to see, I don't know, see yourself reflected or connected some way. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I feel like if everyone's making good decisions, it would just not be. It wouldn't be as fun of a read or as engaging of a read, or maybe like give any sort of have the potential to give the same sort of like lesson or story.
You know, that was a gaggy question. That was oh wow. So that I just wanted to say that. Wow, that's a really good question. I think um in terms of romance, I'd love it if I'd love if all the characters, or like in general, I'd love if all the characters were just making sensical decisions, not decisions that made you wonder what was going on inside their head and stuff like that. But when it comes to romance, I feel like there's a certain aspect of just um, disregarding whatever your mind's telling you, and maybe just being the dumb bitch or playing the dumb the dumbass for some aspects and disregarding um, some levels of self-respect, putting yourself on the line at the chance for something greater just to prove um, your devotion and your affection. Um, I think it's really important in romance stories to have that little flair or that aspect. So most of the times it would be nice to have the characters be level-headed, but there comes a turning point in the story where they have to disregard um, sense or reason to a degree or to a certain aspect in order to get their feelings across.
Yeah, I think just a similar thought to what I share with Michael on Discord. I don't know if a book where all the characters are super smart and make the most like well-informed decisions would really work because I do think that all novels, especially romance novels, do need some sort of conflict between its lovers. But I have just kind of gotten so bored of the typical romance novel decisions. I That's kind of one of the reasons why I stopped reading romance so much is because like they're all kind of stupid, and they're really annoying to read. Um, but yeah, I do think that we do need some level of like foolishness to keep the story interesting. Um, and I kind of want to touch on what Michael said earlier. I'm curious, do I know you guys say you didn't believe in reincarnation, but do you believe that we are destined to make the same mistakes in each of our lifetimes, or do we have a chance to kind of make a different choice?
I don't know. Are you even like really the same person if you don't make some of the same big mistakes or have to learn some of the same big lessons? I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Ooh, for sure. Um, yeah, because like some reincarnation stories, um, isn't that um, the whole point of samsara? I think you have to keep repeating your life until you finally learn your mistake or fix a wrong. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But it's kind of funny because with reincarnation, I think there's a line that you have to tiptoe, like what Michael just said. Are they really the same person if they don't make the same mistakes? But at the same time, what's the point of reincarnating if there's no possibility of doing something different in this lifetime? You know? Yeah, that's all I have to say on it.
That's a really good point, Michael. I didn't consider that. Would you be a different person if you made different choices in life? Um, I am like crossing my fingers, hoping we're not doomed to make the same mistakes. Like I want to think that throughout my life, I'm actually learning something. Um, and that when I'm reincarnated, I'm not doing the same thing over again. Uh, but but yeah, but I mean, I do think that in terms of thinking about deja vu, which I think most of us experience at some point in our lives, I think that is when you remember your past mistake or remember something you've done in the past and you make a different choice, hopefully. So I do think we have the possibility to make different choices. Um, but I think if you keep making the same mistakes over and over again, you're only dooming yourself to be brought back over and over again, similar to what happens to these characters in this book. Because they keep making the same mistakes, they're never going to complete their reincarnation cycle. um, so yeah, that's my thoughts on that. uh, Before we finish, I do kind of want to touch on a few things that the author has said about this book. uh, he compares this story to Romeo and Juliet. Do you think that is a fair comparison, or is that like totally like not fair at all?
Um, I think it's an interesting choice. I don't know that I see some of the same parallels in Romeo and Juliet in this story. Like family involvement is a really big thing in Romeo and Juliet. We don't really get that here, at least not to the same extent. Um, I don't know. They don't all. Well, I guess they do all die, but no, I would just say no. It's an interesting choice, and I'm having a hard time seeing that comparison.
Um, Romeo and Juliet, sweetie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that an ugly ass bitch like that would even say that. No, I'm not talking about the author, by the way. I don't even know what he looks like. I'm talking about the story. But oh my gosh, are you insane? Romeo and Juliet, Romeo and Juliet, Romeo and Juliet. You know what you really read like? Um, I don't know. I just really wanted to quote uh, New York for some reason. But yeah, no, I'm so sorry. I love how he loves his work to that extent. And I feel like anyone would feel that way in something for something that they've labored and toiled for and put in a lot of work and effort in. But that is a steep comparison. I love that for him though.
Yeah, I think it's always a danger to compare yourself to a classic. I'm not 100% sure if he meant it's similar to Romeo and Juliet exactly, or if it's more of like a loose interpretation of Romeo and Juliet. But I don't get Romeo and Juliet at all. I mean, while I didn't necessarily love Romeo and Juliet when I read it, I do think that is a story where I can say unequivocally you do root for the lovers. And in this story, I wanted them to stay as far with each other as possible. Like, please do not get together. So I think even there, it's not a fair comparison. But also in Romeo and Juliet, the obstacle that keeps them apart is everyone in their environment, their families, the political climate of the time period they live in. But in this story, the only thing getting in these characters' way is themselves. So even there, I don't see a fair comparison. But I guess they say aim high, and he did aim high. Um, and then I guess one final thought. Justinian Huang, the author, he has been a vice president at Sony Animations for I think like 10 or so years now. So he has a lot of really close involvement to film, which I'm assuming has shaped at least part of the story. Do you think this book would work better as a movie, or should it stay a book?
I think there's a lot of juiciness here that would lend itself well to some sort of like performance. I don't know about a movie, maybe like a mini series or something, but um, no, I think I could see that, and I think it's a little bit easier to digest some of the things that don't make sense when it's a TV show, because you're just like kind of like see it and then it's gone. And I feel like a book sticks with me longer or differently, or that I just engage with it in a different way. So maybe some of those like world building things could come out better in a TV show or just not be questioned as much in a TV show.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like the modern part of the story could actually translate really well into film. Um, the other parts, I could see it happening since there's a lot of like dynasty and period dramas. Um, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see for sure. Maybe it would give rivers and gardens. Oh, I never asked this. I forgot to ask this. But yeah, maybe it would give rivers and gardens relationship more punch if it ever got an adaptation. But yeah, this is what I wanted to ask. Did River and Gardens relationship or like bond ever fall flat to you guys? Because I really wanted to find something there. And there were like a few moments where I guess I could see the affection and like the bond they had, but overall it kind of fell flat to me. What did you guys think?
I think I just tried to not read too much into Garden's character, other than just seeing her as like someone there to support River. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I don't think I put that much stock into the relationship, but I guess if I start to, maybe it does fall a little bit flat, or like it's just there to sort of like enforce what River's going to do anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I was like rolling my eyes with every scene that River and Garden share. Um, I think to your question, Arian, it feels flat, yes, but possibly intentionally. I think when you have a dynamic between siblings where one sibling has kind of had to be the parent to the other, you're destined to have a more unbalanced relationship that feels a bit unnatural, because it is. I mean, especially because Garden is the younger sibling, which I'm sure kind of adds to that dynamic even more. Uh, but yeah, I didn't really get the inclusion of that. I would have rather us not have had Garden in the story, especially because, at least in my eyes, if she did have counterparts in the other storylines, they weren't super relevant. So we didn't really need her. But yeah, I don't get the inclusion of that, but yeah. And then one final question. How do we feel about reading erotica in this club? Are we open to more? Is this enough? Never again? How do you guys feel?
I'm open to more, and I do think that this one, well, it did have some pretty gratuitous or questionable moments. It wasn't like it wasn't too much or too explicit.
Yeah, I'd be open to more for sure. Um, it's fun, honestly, sometimes to just give it a little read.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to more. Yeah. And I guess to Michael's question, you said it didn't feel too explicit. Are you open to more explicit? Do you want that, or do you want to keep things around this level of explicitness?
So I'm open to more explicit. Yes.
Okay. I'm glad you said that because we do have some other books that, at least from what I've read, promise a more explicit sex scenes. So I'll keep that in mind. Okay. So before we move on to our talk of books for next month, are there any final thoughts, questions, comments, any characters you want to go over, plot lines we missed, anything from the two of you?
Nothing for me.
No, I'm good as well.
Okay. Well, next month is Hispanic Heritage Month, so we're going to be reading a book focusing on Hispanic characters. Before I tell you the name of the book, I'm curious, have either one of you ever read The Great Gatsby?
Yes.
It wasn't part of my curriculum, but I am aware of it. Haven't read it though.
I haven't read it either. It wasn't a part of my school's curriculum either. Did you like it, Michael? Is it a good story?
I mean, I enjoyed it. This was like, assigned reading for high school, however many years ago. So I'm sure that some part of me was like not fully engaging, but um, no, I do. I liked it.
Okay. Well, you of course won't be reading that book, but the book I've chosen for next month is a part of a series called Remixed, where there's a collection of authors that take classic stories from English literature and retell them through a POC and a queer lens. So the book I've chosen is a retelling, POC queer retelling of The Great Gatsby. It's called Self-Made Boys. I'll post the link right now. Uh, just read the description and let me know what you guys think of that.
Yeah, I like this. This sounds fun.
Yeah, it sounds interesting enough.
I did sample it a little bit. It's pretty interesting, at least in the beginning. It is YA, but from what I've read, it doesn't seem super juvenile. It seems pretty adult. So I'm excited for that. And I know, Michael, you've asked for historical fiction in the past, so this will definitely satisfy that for you. It's based in the 1920s, so uh, you'll have that. Um, and I'm thinking last Sunday of September, which would be the 29th. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, It should.
Yep, that works.
Cool. And I know we're not close to October yet, but I do kind of want to jump to October a little bit, so I can establish a plan for October. I'm assuming we're going to be reading horror since it's spooky season, so why not? I'm curious, how intense are you guys willing to get? We have some options that are across the whole spectrum. We have light horror, moderate horror, and like really intense, gory horror. I'm someone who's always looking for something to scare me, so I'm always down for intense horror, but I know that's not everyone's idea of fun. So I guess how intense are you guys willing to go for October's reads?
I will give anything a read, and if I absolutely hate it, then I will say that in the meeting.
I'd actually live for some spooky ooky horror. Yeah. Yeah, I'd love it, honestly.
Okay. I kind of have my mind on one that's a bit moderate, but is pretty gory from what the reviews that I've read say. So I guess we'll see at the end of September what I decide on. But yeah. Okay. Well, that's all I have. Does anyone else have any final thoughts, questions, comments, anything about the book, about the club, anything?
Just my usual thank you as always to everyone for participating. I enjoy it. I look forward to these every month.
Yeah, me too. The usual thanks to Jonathan. Yeah, I really enjoy the company. Thank you.
You guys are welcome. And thank you guys for staying so late. I know we went a little bit longer than usual. I actually had more questions, but I was like, okay, how long do I want to keep these people? Because I don't want to tire you guys out. But thanks for staying the whole time. Um, okay, well, I will see you guys on the 29th of September to discuss Self-Made Boys. And if you have anything else to say, let me know in the Discord. But you guys have a nice day.
Thank you. You too. See you
Bye,
guys.
guys.
See ya. Bye-bye.